Hello, everybody. Welcome to our, well, here he comes right now, to our show today, which we're going to be focusing on 9-figure LinkedIn strategies. And there he is. Boy, I was going to cover for you for a minute, Carson.
No, I'm always on time. Just ask my wife.
Carson was so popular, he was on another podcast or webcast right before this. So we were lucky to get him here.
Guilty as charged.
Anyway, welcome. So, and welcome everybody to our Q&A session on 9-figure LinkedIn strategies. And let me just set the stage on what this is about, because I know some of you may have seen our previous show and some of the things that we've done. So as you may or may not know, and I'll introduce Carson and Brandon here in just a minute, but Carson, who is a director at Microsoft in their Health Solutions division, he and his team closed a 9-figure deal over a month ago or so, Carson, somewhere around a month ago. And
sounds right.
And Carson and I did an interview of him about a month ago about how that deal came together and how they use LinkedIn to actually facilitate getting this done with over 200 stakeholders and over the course of over 2 years. And we'll put the original video of this in the notes or in the comments so you can take a look at that. Well, what happened was we got a lot of questions, and we're going to go through some of those questions today. And if you're listening, please post some questions as you have them right here in the comments, and we'll try and address them. So we decided we were going to do another session to answer some of these, I guess, frequently asked questions that have come up, and that's what we're going to do today. So we're not going to completely recover everything that we covered in the original interview. You can watch that, but we're going to really drill into some of the questions and things that came there. Okay, so with that in mind, let me introduce our two guests here today, because I am the lucky person to be the host again today. Well, let me just introduce myself. My name is Tom Burton. I am the co-founder of Lead Smart Technologies. I'm also the author of the Revenue Zone book. And we're here with Carson Heddy, first of all, who is a director at Microsoft Solutions. He's also, or Microsoft in the health solutions area. He's also a best-selling author. And he also is, and I just learned this today, Carson, you are the #1 social seller at Microsoft. And I saw that you trained a bunch of your fellow colleagues at Microsoft on social selling. So you definitely have a reputation. And we're also here with Brandon Lee. So Brandon is, and I forgot to mention also, Carson, if that wasn't enough, is that you're the host of the Salesman on Fire podcast. And so, you have a lot of things going on in your world. And Brandon Lee is the founder of FunnelAmplified and the host of the Digital Influence Show, as you'll see here. And Brandon has an opinion on social selling, as you can tell by his shirt there. But one of the reasons I really wanted to have Brandon on the show here was Brandon works a lot of, where Carson has been dealing with enterprise companies and large, obviously, mega type deals. Brandon is working with companies every day that are selling maybe not 9-figure deals, but 6-figure deals or 5-figure deals. And so we wanted to put a little bit of a different context in some of these questions. So welcome to both of you, and really excited to get this underway.
Thanks so much, Tom. Yep. Brandon, good to see you. Just thrilled to be here.
Yeah, me as well.
So Carson, why don't we take just a second and kind of do a quick recap of how this whole 9-figure deal came together, kind of the Cliff Note version of all of that. Like I said, there's a lot more details in the original video, but let's just kind of set the stage of what actually occurred there.
Yeah, without a doubt. And thanks to everybody for being on today. This has been the experience of a lifetime, kind of the holy grail of social selling. And I love how you preface this, Tom, because these are fundamentals that I started doing years ago, when I was at a small consultant firm and I needed to open the door with C-level executives that I had zero relationship with. And it was a perfect augment to the process. I think it's important to preface this by saying there were a lot of people that touched this deal. And while social selling and LinkedIn started the conversation and helped us find ways to nurture relationship over time, the deal still doesn't happen with all of the key core fundamentals of selling. We still had to do needs analysis. We still had to understand their priorities and their pain points. We still had to earn the right to be the trusted advisor. We just met a lot of these folks thanks to LinkedIn. And that's what was so important. So it started about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, actually closer to 3 now, on LinkedIn with a message to the president of this relatively large organization that my team and I supported. At the time, I was in a completely different role. I was the account executive on this customer account. Sent a note to the president day 2 of covering this account. He responded. I was in his office the following week and gave him a copy of my CEO's book, which is back here on my bookshelf. Highlighted some passages from pages 88 to 92 where we talk about our own transformation, and understood that they were interested. They were looking at some competitive elements. They were actually interested in doing a partnership because of what a competitor had done with an organization that they had close ties with. And so it was a lot of availing them of some resources that they were entitled to as part of the relationship, things that they knew nothing about at the time, going on the journey with them, really understanding and digging deep. But LinkedIn was instrumental in creating relationships, not only there, but with over 200 different director and above within that organization. And so I will also say that during the course of those few years, we obviously had a lot of changes in the relationship, like a pandemic, like multiple C-level executives that left the organization or retired, lots of folks that changed hands. And amidst all that, I got promoted and I moved into another division. And so it was another account executive and team that actually brought this across the finish line. The whole deal changed. Some of the priorities changed, but at the heart of it all was how we created these relationships. Relationships are what got the deal done.
Yeah, and I remember on our previous interview, which is in the interview, we really talked about this, as you really had the social pulse of the organization. So you knew when new people came on or people left, you knew you were kind of that trusted advisor that everybody looked to along the way. And again, that was all driven by social. So we'll dig into some more questions. Brandon, real quick, how do you, in your world, we've talked a lot about this, but can you see a lot of what Carson has done in terms of building those relationships? You certainly must see this in the small to medium sized business world and the clients that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I love about what Carson is sharing is it's the consistency of the fundamentals. We just happen to change the channel or the medium that we're using, which becomes a more efficient or can be substituted when you have things like whether it's a pandemic and you can't travel as much, or you have inflation and travel budgets are going to, get cut and things like that. We have this amazing, powerful tool at our fingertips that we could use to network, build community, prospect, which is the whole reason why I have the shirt Social Selling Sucks, is really get some attention around what most people think of social selling isn't social selling. It's annoying people. It's bugging your audience. It's pitch slapping. It's throwing your brochures out like free candy at a parade or something. And what I love about what Carson is sharing is he used the fundamentals of selling. It doesn't matter what you're selling. It doesn't matter the size of the deal you're selling. It's about connecting, building rapport, keeping a thumb on the pulse, know who the players are, and becoming liked and trusted and known and remembered by them so that you can serve them. And totally applicable to any size company.
Yeah, that's common to any size company, right? Whether it's 9-figure or a 4-figure deal or a 3-figure deal, you have the same fundamentals that are there in place. Well, let's jump into some of the questions. And if anybody who's on viewing this right now, if you have a question that you would like to get answered, go ahead and put it in, and we'll try and answer them as we go along. I've accumulated or pulled together a number of questions that we've had over the last month, and we'll start with those, and then we'll intertwine those with people that are coming in there. So first question, and these aren't in any particular order. These are just as they've come in. So we might bounce around a little bit, fair warning. So Carson, were there other competitors trying to win this deal? And were they also using social as a strategy, or were they using more traditional non-social ways of engaging with the customer or the prospect?
Great question, Tom. Very much a competitive landscape. In fact, the customer wasn't even thinking about us at the time. We showed up and got the meeting because of LinkedIn and social, but it wasn't until that meeting that we were able to really articulate some of the differentiations and the nuances of what it would look like to do business with us and with our team. So they were thinking about doing a partnership like we proposed because of what a competitor had done. And so that's what their head was.
Okay.
We were up against that model. And so it was important for us to really do a SWOT analysis of, some of the competitive landscapes and show where we were strong and why we were, the preeminent partner. But there was a lot of digging in and relationship building along the way. It was probably about a year later that we were the only ones left in the race. And then it's been the next year really hammering out all of the details and the investments and going through changes within both organizations. As far as the competitors using social, it's an interesting question because I've realized long ago, I applied social as something that solved the problem. So when I started here, and even when I was at my consultant firm prior to joining Microsoft, what I always heard was, we need to get other line of business relationships. And I just asked myself, well, where are these folks? What's the easiest way to go get them? And look, I'm not foreign to the phone. The phone is my favorite tool. In fact, a lot of these conversations happened on the phone. I grew up in a cold calling environment in a boiler room, right? But here it was, I needed to create something at scale and create some of these relationships. But the best relationships are always those warm referrals. So creating that relationship with the president beget introductions to others. And when we did an executive brief, we already knew everyone, in the room and even the folks that they wanted to introduce us to. So I guess to best answer your question, does anybody do it to the level that we did it? Not that I know of. I don't come across a lot of people that do it at this level of scale. And I think that's the key. You can control the quality of your message, the quantity of your outreach, and the consistency of your execution over time. So we try to control the controllables. And that's why we won.
Yeah, that's interesting about, especially, and this kind of ties with the next question, actually, I'll get into about the phone, but it's, phone is one-to-one, right? But if you connected with the president and then the president helps you connect with others and they're building that ecosystem, that's very different than a phone call. And, Brandon, I'm sure you see that as well, right? Is even the vehicle inherently creates a bit of an ecosystem and a relationship over a more traditional communication vehicle like phone or even email.
Yeah, and I think it's the not just the quality, but it's the way that different medium is perceived. I grew up in the cold call too. Like my first job was doing cold call at my college, calling alumni, begging for money. And it was cold. Like I had kind of a script. But what we know about that medium, that channel now is it's interruptive. If they do answer, we're usually going to get a, hey, I'm in the middle of something type of thing. The same thing with email. It's very interruptive. And I'm not saying none of that works. I'm saying I love the phone. I loved email, but I don't use it for cold outreach any longer. I use it in a different stage of the conversation. But when we can get kind of create our own warm introductions to prospects through our social activity, that's where we are able to control how we are perceived and to a point, how we're perceived and who we're introducing ourselves to. So when we do things like publish content that's strategic for our audience, bonus, when we're creating a cadence, so to speak, where we're going in and engaging with activities that our prospects are already doing. So if they like and they comment on something and we come along behind them and we comment on it, we get the power of LinkedIn behind us, which is it's going to send them a notification. It may send them an email. They're going to see my, picture, your name, your headline. Right. It's going to say, this person just commented on it, because LinkedIn wants them coming back into LinkedIn and keep being an engager. So I love, when Carson says it's that warm introduction, when we're in positions where we can't get that warm introduction, we can create it through social media, in my opinion, better than we can with a cold phone call or a cold email.
No, and clearly, and that kind of comes back to the competitive advantage you just said you had, is like when you left Carson, the competitors in the dust. I guarantee you that social part of it is a big piece of that. So we have a question here from Bill that I think is really good. He asked, Carson, over the course of the deal, were there times that the prospect went dark? And if so, what tactics did you and your team use to re-engage them? So that's a really interesting one as well, especially with all the trials and tribulations you had, over that 2-year period.
Yeah, Bill, great to see you. We just spoke yesterday, actually. Always love Bill. So great question. To best answer your question, this deal went through all of the typical challenges that you face in a large deal. Lots of starts and stops, lots of changes in the stakeholders and influencers in the deal. They formed an entire new part of their organization. And so we had to, really make sure that, to Brandon's point, that we were staying at the pulse of what was happening. So as folks went dark in the process, it was really about going back to the key milestones. And, sure, we all send notes from time to time or make calls or whatever the case may be in order to kind of rekindle the dialogue. But I think in this case, it was a case of more making the call to some of the key stakeholders or the whisperers. The whisperers are super important in these situations. You find the folks that have their ear to the ground that can tell you kind of what's the lay of the land, what is changing, that nobody's going to put in an email to you or say on a conference call. So in those types of situations, all tools were leveraged in order to rekindle the dialogue. But what was most effective, frankly, was maybe sending an email or making a phone call to say, we've allocated resources and we've set up these milestones collectively. Are these things still a priority? Because if we're not moving forward based on the milestones that we've established, I'm going to have to, these resources are going to be called to do other projects. And I want to just reiterate that the milestone that we agreed on was still mission critical, that this is still on track. And typically that would get a response. When that resources are allocated, which was the truth, it puts a little bit more skin in the game on the customer side to react and respond and to respectfully do that, right? We're forming a respectful relationship. Deals are a byproduct of a relationship.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump ahead to one of the other questions that I had that we had received earlier is, when that happened, right, when things may have slowed down or gone dark or at least partially dark, did you use like events, so to speak, on LinkedIn or even Teams, where you kind of got everybody together and kind of, tried to revitalize anything, that kind of stuff? So it wasn't just one-to-one, but maybe one-to-many at that point? That was one of the other questions that we had.
Yeah, I like the question. I think the key is we didn't use that as a way to necessarily get people at the table, more or less than we did to kind of stay top of mind. When I discovered these tools and these capabilities a decade ago, the person who showed me some of them told me, find ways to stay top of mind with your brand. And that could be with your personal brand, that could be with your social media presence. But with great tools come great responsibility, right? So the key is not reaching out to folks and, giving them a laundry list of your services in their inbox the second they connect with you. And I think that's why social selling gets such a bad rap. I absolutely believe in building a community around what you do. It's a very passive way of creating groups and starting conversations and being available, frankly. So yes, we've done, LinkedIn events. We've spent time digging into, our marketing insights and pulling customers that have opted into marketing and, engaging them with newsletters and events and things that are pertinent to them. Right. And I think that's super important because it enables you to stay top of mind and build a community around what you're doing. But again, it all comes down to probability, right?
Yep.
Warm handoff, the warm relationship, the introduction that the president makes to, his right-hand person, that has the highest probability of success. But to Brandon's earlier point, a cold call or a cold email might have a very low probability. But if I've crafted and evolved my messaging on LinkedIn and I send a very personalized invitation to connect, I may get 45, 50% connection rate. And now I'm connected with you. I can invite you to things. It doesn't mean I have to engage you immediately, trying to send you everything that I do or why I think I'm of value. I don't know you yet, but I'd love to get the meeting and I'd love to sit down and make sure that you're aware of all the things you're entitled to because of this connection.
That makes total sense. And Brandon, I would think, I think this is something that's not really, I don't even know if I understood it until I talked to Carson about this before, is, even in the small business world or the small, medium-sized business, we talk a lot about, getting in the door with social. But even in a smaller deal, there's stakeholders, right? There could be multiple stakeholders in a B2B deal. There may not be 200, but there may be 3, there may be 4, there may be 5. Building that ecosystem within the organization and building the relationship within there certainly could value even a smaller deal compared to, it seems to me that it's size agnostic, so to speak, and using that strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. It is size agnostic, and I think that it may not be 200, but it's not always 2 or 3 either. Even in small companies, you're still talking about maybe one person with like legit authority to make the decision, but then you got 3 or 4 voices that they speak to, and now those 3 or 4 voices have teams that are speaking into it to the process as well. Why? Because everybody has all the information they need at their fingertips now.
Right.
And so the natural flow of things has been that buying teams has gotten bigger and wider. It's not just, anything I read about, the millennials can't make decisions. No, that's not it. It's the fact that we all have access to information, and you respect the people on your team, that they all can contribute. And so that's where you either look at it as the challenge of going, I need to speak to more people, or you look at it to the opportunity of, I get to speak to more people. And to Carson's point, when you use social, you can do that much more efficiently than any other channel I know, especially because email is, if you don't have that relationship, it's a high likelihood your email is going to be ignored, deleted, or put in a spam folder.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So let's go to Joey's question. Joey, congratulations, Carson, on your win. How did you manage yourself if you felt you were times you thought you might lose the deal? And were there ever a time that you ever thought like you might lose the deal? That'll be the first question.
We did lose the deal. It actually died on the table 6 months before it closed. So I think it's a testament to perseverance of the team and ability to pivot in light of changes of priorities, because that's really what happened. Brandon nailed it. It was, there were a lot of changes in, some of the key influencers. But again, it was relationships that resuscitated this thing. It was based on needs that existed years ago. And there were a lot of changes that transpired over time. So when it was resuscitated, it revisited some of the new priorities. And so the themes were, still legitimate and very viable, but it was important to rekindle this dialogue around what were some of the new priorities and what mattered most. But again, none of that happens without the relationships. And I think that's the real beauty. That's where I really want to hone in on. We started a lot of these key relationships a year to 2 years ago. And when it happened, it was interesting, because we did an executive briefing with the organization. And as the team was going through each of these key or core components, they'd say, hey, if we can prove this out, we'll introduce you to this person, or we'll introduce you to that person. My team and I already knew them because we had met them on LinkedIn. We had met with them. We had actually had discussions about what might make sense. So we were able to tie a lot of very viable use cases into the table. And here's the real beauty of this. Once you've created this level of relationships, you become of immense value to your prospect, to your client, to your customer, because, if I'm not mistaken, it was Gordon Gekko that said that information is still the most valuable commodity. I don't abide by Gordon's practices, but I love it. And I will say that it's still true. And that's what, Brandon, you said this earlier. Social enables you to stay at the pulse, but it also enables you to have all the research that you need so that you can show up immediately with value, consume company reports, see the types of things that they're talking about on social. That enables you to show up in a way that even if the deal stalls, you can rekindle and you can stay at the pulse. Also, the whisperers were key. Even when I felt like the deal was going to die or may not happen or whatever it was, we always had these whisperers within the organization because we had earned that right to be trusted advisor. So we'd reach out. Where are we? What do we need to do? Who do we need to sell? Mm-hmm. And don't ever rely on somebody to do your job and go sell the executive. You need to have that relationship. And those were some lessons learned.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about this on the first interview about the importance of that social pulse, right? Even like to the point, if somebody left and somebody filled that position, they may come to you first because you had the information. You knew more about the company than some people within the company. because you had that social pulse, if you will, of what's going on. And I think that, again, that's very relevant in any size deal, right? Having that social pulse and even in small deals, right? You have turnover and different people coming in and out, or people may change jobs, or all of those types of things. So all of those are relevant.
And Tom, one of the things and Carson, I'd love to hear your take on this too, is that there's some teams that corporately, they may have a tool like a social listening that's going to listen to corporate pages, which is great. But so much of the real meat of those conversations would be taking place in the organic social of the individuals. And if we're not proactively, consistently going in to see who are these folks talking to, engaging with, we lose the thumb on the pulse. And I think that's where a huge competitive advantage is if we're consistent. Now, I know some people say, oh, my prospects don't post. Well, if they're socially active, even if they're not personally posting, what they're commenting on or what they're liking gives you insights as to what's going on internally, especially when they comment. And what I've discovered over the years, tell me if you guys are consistent with this, is that when buyers are out trying to figure out a solution and researching, they're socially active because that's where they're going to learn and ask questions. So I think two things there is when, we can social listen at the corporate level, but there aren't tools in place technology-wise. LinkedIn doesn't allow it where we can socially listen at the individual level. So we have to put in our own cadences to go there and look and see what are they talking about. And then I think secondly, to kind of tag on to that is being prepared that when we're seeing things and we're reading things that they might be going through, not just being the first one there, but having the right type of information to share. And sometimes even as simple as, Carson, I would imagine that your show, Salesman on Fire, it creates credibility. It gives you an opportunity to stay top of mind without trying to sell anything or trying to be top of mind. You keep talking about the industry and you're staying top of mind. And that just creates a ton of credibility as well as just being top of mind.
Yeah. And I would assume, that it's not any one thing, right? It's a collection of all of the things together that create that momentum, of those things that were there. So we got more questions coming in. So I'm going to try and keep up with all of these. We have a LinkedIn user, so I don't know who this is from, but Carson, they're asking you, and I like this question, but I'd actually going to add a little bit of my own spin to it. But the question was how you convinced your teammates to work on the projects during the pandemic. Can you provide some inputs on how to be a good leader? I want to take that even one step further. Is you mentioned, the LinkedIn user there, he or she mentioned the pandemic. I would assume there was quite a bit of leadership that had to happen, not only with your team, but with the prospect or the customer, just because of the disruption I remember when the pandemic first occurred, just the amount of disruption about, are we working? Are we not working? Where are we working? And you magnify that at 200 person, it must've been very, very large. So talk a little bit about how you led the team and the group through that.
Well, I personally, I give all the credit to the team for their professionalism. It was easier than one would imagine. Probably a lot of grace given. A lot of taking it moment by moment. If anything, if a long career in sales teaches you anything, it's that you have to be able to adapt and evolve and be mindful and live in the moment and operate in ambiguous situations, kind of like managing a large deal, right? So a lot of it was, engaging the team, making sure that they were, seeing where they were, doing check-ins with the team, understanding some of their priorities as things shifted, and being versatile with, some of the twists and turns that the deal took, working on projects in the pandemic when, everybody was shifting to working full time from home. And, we were on virtual calls all the time. It was quite a shock to the system. So I think the key was meeting people where they were, but also acknowledging the fact that we're all in the same boat together. And it's no different than right now. There's still a lot of ambiguity with where we're going, with possible recession and with, interspersing, getting back to face with the hybrid element. So, key to any environment is understanding the playing field, right? Know the playing field, know the players, and how can I best show up amidst all that? And so that was key for me. And what's great about this too is social selling and LinkedIn and all these tools. They can be applied to just about anything. It's opening the door and creating a relationship. I remember my team and I, we would send videos to customers at the onset of the pandemic, just saying that we were there. If they needed anything, if they had questions, whatever it was, we were thinking about them, and that we were available if they needed anything, and spent time doing that. It was an investment in the relationship. It wasn't about showing up trying to sell anything. It was just being available. And, I think that went a long way, because again, if you invest in relationships, if you nurture relationships, that's ultimately how you get, I've never worried about a result a day in my life. I've always spent time investing in the relationships, and the deals come. So I would say that was probably how we really adjusted it, adjusted to the situation in the pandemic, but really we adjust anytime that there's a massive shift in the tectonic plates.
Well, interesting point there that you just said about the relationship, right? A lot of people, right, are trying to manage pipelines and put probabilities on pipelines. Talk about a canary in the coal mine, right? If you see your relationship level deteriorating, you probably can see your pipeline or your forecast deteriorating. If the relationship is strong and growing, your probability on your pipeline, your things, that's a different way of looking at pipeline than more of the traditional forecasting strategies that are there. But I think very relevant, right? Because we all kind of know sometimes when a deal is starting to slip away. Well, if you really look at it, it's probably because you see the relationship starting to slip away or deteriorate, or somebody else has come in and maybe taken over that trusted advisor role that I had, and I didn't even know it, through a competitor or whatever the case may be.
Well said.
All right, let's go to Leanne. Thanks for the question, Leanne. She says, Carson, with the changes of stakeholders and priorities over the course of the deal, how did you manage expectations with different key stakeholders? I think
that.
probably the key word there is expectations, because I could see that could change a lot over time.
Yeah, I think to best answer your question, Leanne, that's a brilliant question. It really comes down to transparency and communication. We took a proactive attempt at creating a living, breathing document that we could leverage with this organization. And we established a cadence with some of their key influencers, key stakeholders. But the goal of that cadence was to go through this document. But everybody that I was meeting with within the organization, and then the subsequent team that I passed the baton to, these were, this document lived, breathed, changed tremendously. We would meet. Is this still a priority? Nope. Strike it. What is there a new priority? Are there new action items that we needed to do? I'm a big believer in daily non-negotiables. I'll kind of go through the list every day before I get sucked into all the minutia and my email inbox. Go through those daily non-negotiables, and so we would ask ourselves, do we need to take an action on this item today? Is there an introduction we need to make? Is there a stakeholder we need to reach out to? And as there were changes, the beauty was, Leanne, we were so well entrenched in this organization by the time that as people moved out, we would be, immediately introduced into some of the new key players. Now, some of that ebbed and flowed, as everything does, but I think that's the real beauty and benefit of creation of some of these relationships, doing some of the social listening, like Brandon said. We had to, keep our eye on the ball, and as things were being said or posted. I mean, do you know that you can go out and do a keyword search on LinkedIn or Sales Navigator for your target prospect and maybe a competitor's name, and you can see like who's trained in that competitor, who's blogging about that competitor? That's valuable intel. So, that kind of, those things help to stay at the pulse, but, just being very transparent and communicative with the key stakeholders was very key. And see, that's the other element. A lot of people, especially in prospecting or reaching out or developing relationships with an organization, you may reach out to 5, 10 executives and go over the room. It's happened to me. But the reason that these things work for me and for my team is because I don't just go for 5 or 10 people. In this organization, I reached out to over 500 people that were director and above over the 2.5 years that we supported the organization. That's how we created 250 relationships. And so the key is, don't just think about the key influencers, think about their influencers. Create a groundswell so that you're so valuable to that organization because of the knowledge you possess by talking to all of these different folks in the organization. I feel like, we started with a little snowball, and over time, it just became an avalanche. And so they needed us because of the intel that we had and how at the pulse we were of that organization.
So I think there's another best practice there that you just mentioned, and I don't know what the right word is. It sounded like you had a bit of a manifesto or a charter, right, about what this deal was about. And I would see, Brandon, I think this is something that's really a great takeaway again for the smaller, medium-sized, B2B deal, is make sure you know what that manifesto or your charter is of what you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, I could see you like pinballing all around, having a lot of conversations, but there's no vector that really then leads to where we're trying to go. And to your point, Carson, keep bringing them back to that charter, that manifesto, and make sure this goes back to expectations. Are those still the right expectations? That happens even in the smallest of deals, all the time.
Yeah. And, I mean, in some ways, Carson's speaking a completely foreign language to organizations like Tom, you alluded to earlier about the revenue forecasting models and daily KPIs that are wrapped around cold outreach and engaging in enrolling people into cadences, like those types of systems. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of companies that adhere to that. Go raise venture capital and put hundreds of butts in seats to make dials. What Carson just said there is going to be a completely foreign concept. And I think what we have all been talking about is, I think, getting back to, Tom, you and I use the terms, bringing the humanity back into sales with social, where it's just that it's relationship building, it's connecting. I love, like, Christopher Tuff, in his book, he says, stop using the word prospect and use the word connect. Stop prospecting, connect. Right? Build rapport, build relationship. At the end of the day, you can't lose when that's what you're doing. And I think, Carson alluded to that. He never worries about the result. You just worry about the relationship. And man, somehow the results work out and work out better. And then you're talking in public about what you do. And the amazing thing is how many people still want to kind of take pop shots at it and say, yeah, but, and gosh, it's a proven model. I think it's been proven before the internet. It was proven before social media. It was proven before LinkedIn. We're just applying relationship building and good sales foundational tactics into this new thing that we call LinkedIn or social media. Yeah. Well, new.
I love that you said that, Brandon, because I want to stick on that for 1 second. And here's why. When I started doing some of these things years ago, people didn't get it. They didn't understand it. Carson, his prospecting, going to fill his pipeline, he's just doing something on LinkedIn. They didn't get it. Now, when multiple multi-million-dollar deals started to be the result, then people took notice. They had asked me to train my team, then broader team, then it was across the country. Now it's all over the world. I might get on a call and at night when I get my kid to sleep and talk to a team in Singapore or Italy or France or wherever it is. And it's insane. I'm just a small town guy from the Midwest US, right? So that blows my mind every day. My career here is completely different than the first half of my career, but it's all about those fundamentals based on creation of relationships. And so it's benefited not only my day-to-day, but also my personal brand, because I've been able to establish that this is something that I'm super passionate about: creation of relationships with social tools. Would this deal have happened without LinkedIn? No, but it also wouldn't have happened without legitimate creation of relationships, using the telephone, crafting a strategy, making sure we were transparent and communicative, and working on this collaboratively throughout, and a cast of hundreds that touched this over the last few years. So all of those things are key. Social selling is an augment. It's a complement to your process that, in this case, I couldn't have lived without.
Yeah, I can totally agree. All right, trying to keep up with the questions. We have another question from a LinkedIn user. During the course of the deal, did you change your selling style throughout the process, or did you stick with a consultative, the same consultative selling style that you started with? And I think you may have touched on this already a little bit, but did anything change as you went along, or was it just continuing to build the relationships and widening the breadth and the depth of the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, Tom. It's the breadth and depth. As things expand, the bubble expands, right? You start out, you have this one key relationship. One of the other members of my team started a relationship via LinkedIn with another key influencer in this deal. We were able to marry some of those efforts. We were able to spend time and create some additional relationships. So all the while, it was planting a lot of seeds, not knowing what was going to sprout, but it's betting big on this process. I'm a big probability and odds believer. You know, Tom, I know when we talked about the movie Moneyball. That is the basis for this, really. It's statistically driven. If I go out and try to create 500 relationships, guess what? I'm going to get some meetings, and I know what I can do with that meeting. And once I get in that meeting, I create that relationship. I find out what's important to this stakeholder. And as I meet with maybe 30 other line of business folks, they all have different priorities. They all might have different P&Ls. They all might have different things that they're driving toward, or threats, or whatever it is. And as you understand all of those, it's gathering all of that intel. Now, the key element here, the real, what really makes this tick, though, is being able to orchestrate everything. I'm a believer in relationships, but also resources. I get paid to be an evangelist of my brand, but an advocate of my customer. And so I need to make sure that I understand them well enough to advocate for them internally as I orchestrate all the resources and the team, et cetera. And I wasn't the only player in all of that. So I think those were some of the changes, right? Very consultative, but also as the bubble got bigger, making sure to effectively orchestrate everything that was involved and everything that was at stake.
And again, I think that, and this may be my biggest takeaway from today, is that importance of that charter or that manifesto of the deal. Because if you don't have that, again, it can get out of control really quickly. So it gives you that stable point to be coming back to keep, no matter what happens, right? Whatever trials and tribulations, is this still our manifesto? Is this our charter that we're going after? Are these still the expectations? Are these still, right? It just gives us something to keep coming back to.
And part of that, Tom, was a leap of faith. We took a proactive stab at sending this. We might have gotten it wrong, but the reality is, if you have nothing, what are you risking? So we sent it, and it was, hey, keep us honest. This is the way we see things. This is the way we see some of these things aligning, some of the key stakeholders. Correct us. But it was important because we didn't know how it would land, but it showed how well entrenched we were. And it was basically on paper in front of everybody. These are the relationships we have. These are where we see some of the priorities. These are areas where we think we can help. These are introductions we can make, or relationships or investments that we can make. And that was a big vehicle that got things moving. Yeah.
And again, if you keep coming back to that same point all the way through, right? You keep coming back to that stable point all the way through. It just keeps everything from falling apart, no matter what actually occurs along the way. And, again, Brandon, I think that's something that really, I know you have a system, right? You call it your social outreach system, but I think also really for somebody, making sure they really understand when they outreach or when they build that relationship, why they're doing it, what they want to accomplish, and then continue to solidify that through the relationship, right? Keep building more agreement around that charter or that manifesto. Talk about a competitive advantage than what you would have over, somebody else when you're doing that well.
Well, and I think what you're talking about for me is tactics and strategy, right? If you have a tactics without a strategy that's going to pull it all together, they're just tactics, they're just activities, it's just behavior.
Good point. Good point.
But I think what I take is from Carson saying you have that manifesto, it's a strategy around it. And his strategy was being authentic, being upfront, making sure constantly checking in, but using a document as that barometer to say, are we on track? Is there anything that needs to be edited and updated? And the reality is, any business of any size, even to a solopreneur, can take that as a strategy and activate it as a tactic. And it leads to greater success. Why? Well, because your buyer or buyers or team of buyers feel that you really got their back, that you're totally ingrained in the way they're thinking, the way they're moving this thing forward, and you firmly established yourself as that trusted advisor. And when so many companies out there, especially at the SMB level, are not taking that approach of a trusted advisor, it's a lot easier to stand out and win those deals because you are that trusted advisor.
Yep. Nope. Completely agree. All right, boy, we have questions coming in, and we're going to keep it to an hour, so we may have to do a part 2 here. But the next one is from Wayne, and I think we may have touched on this already, but I want to make sure we address the question. Is Carson, how did you and the team manage situations where changing of the guard occurred? You know, you talked about different people coming and going throughout the life cycle of the deal. I would assume a lot of the same stuff we've talked about the manifesto, being that trusted advisor, but anything else specifically that you really did to handle that changing of the guard?
Absolutely. That's a great question. We did touch on a few of these items, but I think the key was, Tom, it was social listening was key. The relationships we had were key. And when I say social listening was key, like even just looking at Sales Navigator or subscribing to the Business Journal and seeing some of these announcements, or, it's such a great way to see like M&A activity that's pending, or, here's a new C-level. And that would prompt me immediately. Like I need to reach out to this person, create a relationship, right? And you can show up with immediate value. You have intel now because you've spent however long working with and collaborating with this organization. So, you mentioned the manifesto. I love that title. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to start using that. But you can use that as like, kind of a way to create a dialogue with a new executive. So there were warm handoffs, right? Warm relationships. When the president that I connected with in 2019 retired, he introduced me to some of the new players. And ironically, he wound up being on the board at a future customer. So that's why you always invest in relationships, because you never know where these folks will go. You can plant seeds that will sprout multiple gardens. But the beauty is, staying in touch with the key influencers, showing up with immediate value of the intel that you already have about the organization, and staying at the pulse of the organization, as there were new executives and especially new priorities, making sure that you take those priorities and now go back to your team. So there was a lot of communication with the organization that we were supporting, the customer, but also internally, a lot of internal collaboration, make sure that everybody that's touching this deal or that you need touching this deal has visibility to and line of sight to these priorities, because ultimately we all have to map it and we all have to speak the same language. There's no better way to connect with a customer than to be able to talk to them about their own mission statement and to tie everything that they do to their pillars. That gives you instant credibility because it shows you're paying attention.
Well, and we're getting quite a few comments here just around the concept of the manifesto and the charter, right? So, and to me, it sounds like you started off with that. You started off by saying, hey, let me give you something. Here's what I think I'm hearing you say, right? Is this really correct? And they probably were like, yeah, that's pretty close, or, it was maybe even a little wobbly in the beginning. But as you keep building around it and you keep building the agreement and you keep building all of those things, now the organization starts to align around that, and it becomes, truly the Bible that they're operating off of as it relates to how they're moving things forward. So I think what I really like about it is it really amplifies the power of the social part of it, right? By using social to keep building the momentum and the agreement around the manifesto or charter or whatever you call it. Now you kind of get the group to gel even more, and that social pulse now starts to come around all of those things there. So I think there's just tons of stuff that can be incorporated in this from a social perspective. I'm going to keep moving here with some of the questions. Let's see here. Oh, we have one here from Kevin Brown. Kevin's my co-founder at Lead Smart Technology. Hopefully he's not trying to beat me up too bad with his question here. So question. So at Lead Smart, we work with a lot of manufacturers and field salespeople, distributors, people that are out in the field. They're not necessarily in the office. As Kevin's asking, is there a regional manager or for a manufacturer or a field salesperson for a distributor who jumps in a truck every day and visits job sites? Is there, how can some of these people possibly apply some of this strategy using social and so forth? Do either of you have a thought on that? Brandon, maybe I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think those type of salespeople actually have a huge advantage when it comes to social in a lot of ways, because they already do the daily tactics. They just do it differently. They do it offline versus online. As Kevin even just said in there, they're jumping in a truck, they're going out and visiting people, they're knocking on doors, whether it's a cold door, a warm door, an existing client. And when they get there, they're building rapport, they're building relationship, they're trying to establish themselves as being a trusted advisor. I personally would rather talk with somebody that has that as a history on how to use social, because it's a simple, hey, look, nothing has changed. It just happens over here. You're doing the same thing. We're just going to do it digitally. And this is what it looks like tactically, versus a sales team that is, 100 cold call KPIs per day and enroll 30 people a day in a cold cadence and pound, pound, pound. That's a much harder conversation for me. In fact, I don't really entertain those conversations anymore. I've wasted enough time. I've given myself enough headaches trying to pull a challenger approach with them and say, yeah, but. So I think for them, this is hugely applicable. And now it's just a little bit of changing the medium that it takes place in, and then training them on how to convert that from offline to online. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I don't know what to comment. I get this one a lot. I don't know what to comment. Well, close your eyes and imagine that you're standing across from them in the lobby of their office, or across the table at a restaurant, or in a networking event, and you both have a cocktail in your hand, whatever it is, and they verbally said that. What would you say in response? And a lot of times, those types of salespeople, they get it because this is what they do all day long.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on it.
No, I think that's awesome. And, even and we see this even in this industry that Kevin mentioned, prior maybe to the pandemic, they were 100, the sales teams were 100% on the road. Now it's a bit more hybrid, right? They're not quite on the road as much, or if they are on the road visiting people, maybe not everybody's in the office because they're working from home, or right. So we definitely have a virtual environment that's still here and will be here for a long period of time. So you could augment your in-person with social. To me, 1 + 1 would be 3. And, Carson, I would expect, even probably prior to the pandemic, and I've been in enterprise sales and worked in enterprise sales quite a bit over my career. A lot of enterprise sales people are out meeting with customers. They're out in the field. Did you see changes in that? And do you see, that a lot of the people that maybe were doing more in person, using more of a hybrid approach in your world?
Yeah, every in-person meeting that I've been in since the pandemic has had some element of hybrid approach, where there's been people joining virtually. There's no geographical barriers anymore to anything. And I think the real challenge, what I challenge listeners today with, is just, there's no silver bullet. LinkedIn isn't a silver bullet, but what it does, Brandon said this brilliantly, it augments what we do. And so, do you need a relationship? Right? You can apply these techniques anywhere. I use them to recruit and meet talent. I utilize them to create relationships in my career, find aspirational mentors. I've used them to not only, create these relationships with customers, but, Tom, you alluded to this earlier. You can build a community around what you do. You can set up a LinkedIn event, invite people, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual. You can invite 1,000 people to something a week, and it enables you to scale and touch people in a way that you never could before. It doesn't erase the need for the face-to-face, but there's nothing better to establish your brand and establish yourself as a thought leader or as an authority, give you the ability to create content and engage people and start conversations. That's what it's all about. But think about 10 relationships you need to go out and create, or 20, and you can go out and create them and have a better probability of success with these techniques. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no. And I do, just to reiterate, I believe that if you are able to do, more in-person stuff and field stuff, that's awesome. It's your point, Brandon. There's a lot of relationship in that, but if you can combine that with social, that is 1 + 1 = 3 or 5, right? And you're going to get way more out of those visits than you would if you just show up and, you have something to read on from there.
Don't discriminate against any way of connecting with someone.
There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In looking at the efficiency potential with it too, right? So take one of these field reps that Kevin's talking about. They get in their van and they go door knocking or go visit people. How many people are they going to visit in a day? How many lunches can you have with a customer in a day? Right. But if you're sitting behind a desk and you're reaching out with people via posts that you publish, it is a one-to-many model. But then you can take that and turn it into a one-to-one strategy by saying, hey, Carson is an example. Carson, I published this post today and I was thinking about you in these areas. I'd love to hear kind of what you think about it, or does it add value to you? So you've taken this one-to-many, you turned it into an ability to do one-to-one. And then when you go comment on other people's activity, you're showing up in their environment, and yeah, you're inviting yourself into the conversation, but you're doing it in a public forum where it's totally acceptable, allowed, and welcomed. And what can you do in 1 or 2 hours a day in front of a computer from a quantity and an efficiency side, especially when, Carson, you can speak to this, you got 200 to 500 individuals that you need to get to know and influence as part of a deal.
I mean, we spend so much time trying to get a demo or a briefing. And, with these tools, you have the ability to reach out to thousands of people, invite them to a webinar or a briefing, or send them a newsletter, get telemetry and data on that, like what they viewed, how long did they view it. And you can apply that to anything. I love what you said, Brandon, about like, how many lunches can you have in a given day, right? But you have the ability to do a demo that's what we're fighting for, right? As sellers, often to get that demo, you could do a free technical briefing, invite thousands of people, get hundreds of attendees, and you've just fast forwarded to the second date.
And that applies totally even to our, the industry that Kevin brought up, right? Whether it's a demo or a trial or all of those things, right? Somebody wants to see it, they want to touch it, they want to feel it. There's lots of ways to accomplish that. All right. Well, we're down to the last few minutes here. I want to keep this to an hour. Let's do real quick. If each of you, Carson, Brandon, and I'll do it as well. What is maybe the one biggest lesson learned that you feel, out of even of our conversation today, or even from your, the background in this deal, that you would want to leave with somebody? If there's one thing that if we want to leave with somebody, what would that be? I'll start with you, Carson.
One thing. The key is you don't have to do it perfectly. Just do it. Just use these things to go out and research, make yourself more knowledgeable about what customers, your target customer, your target industry, whatever it is. Use these tools to make yourself more educated on these facets of business that are super important, and use them to try to create genuine, authentic relationships, because just doing it is better than not doing it. If you're not doing it, you're discriminating against a whole lot of potential relationships that you could have. And you're going to have some stops and starts. There's going to be ups and downs to it, but it's a probability thing. And if you show up as your authentic self and you follow the process and you use these things to further your pursuit to become the trusted advisor within the organizations that you seek to collaborate with, you're going to win. And seek a win. Find out what looks like a win to everybody you touch, whether it's internal or your customers. And if you do that and you seek to serve that win up for everybody, that's how you're going to win.
Well, and I think, again, to focus on process, not perfection, right? And a lot of times we get caught up in perfection and we throw the process away, or we don't do it at all. And, you'll get better and better, right? I'm sure you're getting better every day, and you've been doing it for a long time. So, Brandon, what's your one key lesson learned takeaway for the day?
Well, I've taken a bunch of notes, but once you asked it, I thought about this. Just start using it. And that's the key. I think that there's, I don't know if you guys saw my post today. I talked in my post today about imposter syndrome, and I still carry imposter syndrome because this whole social media thing is evolving and moving. And I've learned a lot from people in their 20s. I'm learning things from people in their 60s. Like, this whole social media thing is still pretty new, and how you're using it. I think if the core of who you are is about connecting and building relationship and rapport, then you just have to start trying things and see what works well for you, what works well with your customers. I think that one thing I do recognize with influencers, and I'm going to use the big term influencers because I don't care if it's Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. It's they're trying, they're showing up, they're providing content, and they're being consistent, and that's what's helping them win. And that's, I think what we're all in a season now, we're all in an era that we need to start using this because it's a competitive advantage that we all desperately need in the competitive times that we're in.
Thank you. No, totally agree. So my takeaway, I'm going to go back to the same thing, what I mentioned earlier, is really keeping your eye on your objective. Whether you do that through a manifesto, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, but in the book, my book, The Revenue Zone, right? That's what the whole concept of the revenue zone is what is that, right? What does that mean? What does that mean for you and what you're trying to accomplish? Well, I think that's exactly, having that charter, that manifesto, and making sure, especially if you're working with a sales team and a larger group of stakeholders, that that's constantly reinforced. Because the problem, right, with social, if you would say that, is it can get out of control into a lot of conversations. It can get very dispersed, and then the whole thing gets diluted of what we're trying to accomplish. So I think it's super important to keep an eye on what you're trying to accomplish. What does it mean to get your prospect into that revenue zone, right, as I like to talk about, and then build your strategy accordingly around all of that. So that was my biggest takeaway. All right, we're just a few seconds over time. Awesome. I have a feeling we're going to do this again. This was just, and I still have 15 questions we didn't cover on all of this stuff. Carson, where can people find you if they want to, learn more, follow more what you're doing, all that kind of stuff?
LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out anytime. Love it. Love chatting. Also, my blog is at carsonvhetty.com. And Tom, Brandon, thank you so much for this. I had a blast.
Brandon, where can people find you, or best place to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn as well. And you can find me at FunnelAmplified too. And here's my shameless plug. We don't have it all figured out. We don't have it worked out at all exactly. But what we're trying to do is, how do we empower individuals and teams to use social media to do all the things that we talked about today? And we're building technology to help. And if anybody wants to come and be a part of the team that's trying to figure out how we do this better, we'd love to have you come in, use it, and join the power users community, where we're all sharing with each other and learning and trying things and falling on our face. And it's all good because we're all moving forward together.
Yep. No, that's for sure. And I'm also on LinkedIn, tburton5350. So please follow, reach out, connect, whatever. Leadsmarttech.com, my software company that we mentioned, that Kevin and I check it out. Always interested in anybody interested in that area. And speaking of my book, if we're giving away a Kindle copy for the next 2 days, Thursday and Friday, tomorrow and Friday. So if you'd like a free Kindle copy, go to Amazon and you can get a free Kindle copy for 2 days on the revenue zone. So that's my gift for everybody attending today. All right. Thanks, everybody. Again, great session. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.